Welcome, traveler. Tonight we drift into They Called Us Barbarians, until they saw what we became. You step through the pressure lock hatch of an abandoned outpost hanging on the lip of known space. The air's thin, but breathable. The lights flicker like they're unsure if they should even bother staying on. Everything smells like rusted memory. Metal, dust, and the faint afterglow of ozone from systems that haven't fully shut down since the war ended. If it ended. There's no official record. Only silence. You're here because curiosity itches louder than fear, and let's be honest, you'd probably get vaporized within 5 minutes if this place weren't already declared historically inert. Good news. You're just here. For the story, not the radiation. If you end up liking this quiet little corner of the galaxy, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. But only if it genuinely makes your evening better. Tell me where and when you're listening from. I always love seeing the spread across the stars and time zones. Now lower the lights, maybe let a soft fan hum in the background, and let's begin the drift into tonight's quiet orbit. You run your gloved hand along the corridor's wall. It's covered in scratches. Not claw marks, tools, desperate ones. This outpost didn't die from neglect. It bled out during something primitive. At the far end, you find a viewport. Behind it, the debris field floats like ancient confetti. Not just from human ships. There are alien hulls here, organic designs, glowing circuits, vessels that once pulsed with solar synth life. Now, shattered, some still drifting on broken inertia, all silent. This place was the first engagement. They never expected us to fight back, not here, not like that. Not with jury-rigged freighters slamming into patrol ships, nor with humans using fusion torches as weapons of desperation. The Council never called it a war. That would have legitimized us. No. This was a containment effort. They assumed we'd collapse. But barbarians don't collapse, they dig in, and this outpost became a symbol, a myth. The place where one rust-covered militia outmaneuvered 3 armadas. You float through the mess hall, chairs bolted to the floor, still twisted. A knife, uncleaned, embedded in a table. Someone carved a message next to it in 3 languages. They said we were beasts. Beasts don't build ships like this. Poetic, sure, delusional, maybe. But here's the thing about human persistence. It's not about winning. It's about outlasting, outstaring, outliving. You come to a command room. A single chair sits upright. And there's a skeleton still in it, wearing a patched-up flight suit. Around the collar, a crude metal made from alien scrap. Probably ceremonial, probably not. You sit for a moment. Listen to the hum of the past. Some galactic historians still argue whether this outpost should be remembered as the beginning of humanity's rise, or the first domino in the galaxy's unraveling. Depends on who you ask. Depends on if you're still alive to answer. You finally stand, eyes on the observation window. Beyond the wreckage, a faint shimmer of starlight cuts across the black. Peaceful now. But once, this was the edge of the map. The place where the rest of the galaxy whispered warnings and where humanity replied without words. They laughed. Not the nervous kind of laugh either. It was the kind of chuckle someone gives when a toddler declares war on gravity by jumping off the couch with a cape. Endearing. Naive. Not worth intervention. You remember the footage? Grainy, archived, probably restored 1,000 times by now. A meeting hall deep in the heart of the Galactic Concord's core world, 12 species sitting in elegant curvature, each in their native atmospheric chamber, all watching the same video feed. Humanity's first formal message to the stars. No grand symphony, no poetic overture. Just a woman in a patched suit and a Mars-stamped insignia saying, "We see you, we're coming." The laughter echoed through galaxies. The Evrathi called us biological improvisations. The Sidarians said our presence would make interstellar diplomacy statistically louder. And the Vonthari ambassador? He just blinked his 7 eyes and said, "Charming." But charm didn't stop the expeditions. They sent envoys, scouts, probes. And when they arrived at Earth, they found a planet in recovery, scarred, defiant, crawling toward the stars with duct tape and ambition. We didn't have planetary shields. We didn't terraform with nanoclouds. We didn't even recycle water properly. But what we did have was will and teeth, and a very unsettling ability to make anything into a weapon, including language. You pause at the exhibit labeled First. Contact. It's not a pristine plaque. It's a cracked video screen embedded in the wall of the derelict. It replays the moment the first envoy landed in the Mojave and was met not with flowers, but a cowboy hat, a translator app, and a welcome barbecue, complete, with suspicious meat and unsolicited philosophy. You folk got faster than light, the man had said, flipping a skewer. We got stories, want to trade? The envoy declined the skewer. It was a diplomatic mistake. From then on, they labeled us unpredictable. Not dangerous, just inconvenient. They didn't notice how often unpredictable became a footnote in their emergency protocols. See, humanity doesn't win because it's the strongest or smartest. It wins because it rewrites the rules halfway through the game and then sells you the revised manual with annotations and sarcasm. You pass by a cracked mural, once a celebration of unity, now faded. 12 species, including a small figure, in a scratched helmet. The human was placed at the edge, almost falling off the frame. Some artist's idea of cosmic comedy. They laughed. At first, until they saw the mining ships. Until they realized we weren't trying to join the galaxy. We were trying to outlast it. There's a difference. Some say that moment, when the Council's laughter began to fade, was the true beginning of the shift. Others think it was much later. Maybe they're both right. All you know is that after that barbecue, nobody ever made fun of the human tongue again. Bootprints in orbit. That's what they called it. An expression coined by an Iridian poet of all things. It described the first time the Galactic Concord looked up and saw us not just crawling into space, but stomping into it with steel soles and flammable optimism. You float now above what used to be the Riftwalker, Earth's first long-range dreadnought. Technically, it was an ore hauler repurposed by a consortium of engineers, former asteroid miners, and one unlicensed weapons dealer named Shelley. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't fast, but it made an impression. The hull is still scorched in places blackened from skirmishes with patrol units sent to politely discourage unauthorized deep space operations. You run your fingers over a jagged weld, likely done mid-flight by someone who believed airtight was more of a suggestion than a standard. Inside, the Riftwalker feels like a museum built by pirates. Panels don't match. Console readouts alternate between 3 Earth languages and 1 bad translation of Sidarian glyphs. There's a sign in the galley. Coffee is sacred. Touch it and float home. You laugh, quietly. This ship wasn't supposed to go to war. But that's the thing. They never expected us to bring this. A dreadnought that didn't hum with quantum shields or telepathic relays, but roared with fossil engine backup drives and railguns rigged from industrial crushers. To the conquered, it was barbaric. To us, it was home. You walk the deck and find a shrine of sorts. A corner where the original crew scratched their names, dates, some even added DNA tags. One entry reads, "Left Earth with nothing, came back with respect, not universally." True, of course. The Council didn't respect us, not then. But they started to notice. And in diplomacy, that's more dangerous. A minor encounter near the Telvon verge is etched in the ship's log. The Riftwalker, badly outgunned, was told to retreat. Instead, the captain transmitted a single sentence, "We may not win, but you'll remember us." Then they fired every mining drill, every flare launcher, and even ejected spare hull plates at orbital velocity, turning junk into jagged declarations. The enemy backed off, not out of fear but out of confusion. That's how it always began, with disbelief. Some galactic scholars later argued that the dreadnoughts were humanity's first true message, not the hopeful greetings or the naive treaties, but these walking scrapyards in space made to survive, not impress, and they were right. You stand now in the observation pod where the stars stretch endless. Beneath you, the planetary ring of Garosta glitters like shattered promises. One of those promises was made right here, when humanity agreed to halt expansion in exchange for peace. Spoiler, they didn't, because peace isn't what we wanted. We wanted room to grow, and when you're called a barbarian, you learn to build not cathedrals but catapults. Some say that Dreadnought was ugly, others say it was inspiring. But even now, generations later, one truth remains etched in metal and memory. We left footprints and they'll never be able to erase them. They sent diplomats, we sent miners, not as a snub, not even out of defiance. It's just, when the Council tried to schedule a summit, Earth was too busy cracking open asteroid belts like pistachios. You step onto the platform of what remains of excavation site B97, floating inside the belt of the Varnak cluster. From a distance it looks abandoned, until your boots land and vibrations ripple through the flooring. Somewhere, deep in the station's belly, machinery still hums. Self-repair routines maybe. Or maybe the place just forgot how to die. They wanted us to meet them at the Celestial Spire, a diplomatic station bathed in starlight and consensus. We declined. Not rudely, just practically. Sorry, can't make it, we told them. We're sitting on a platinum-rich orbit and 6 new exocores, maybe next quarter. To the Council, it was barbarism, who prioritized mining over diplomacy, who chased resource acquisition before learning the nuances of interstellar etiquette. The answer, as always, was humanity. You walk past the remains of a drilling mech, its claws still buried in the rock wall, long dormant. The scale is absurd. This wasn't a machine, it was a monster. Human-designed, purpose-built, not elegant, but efficient. The kind of tool that didn't ask if it should, only could. There's a graffiti tag sprayed onto the mech's leg. Diplomacy is what happens when you run out of power cells. Crude? Yes, but fair. See, while the Council debated protocols and proper introductions, humanity learned to terraform on the fly, to strip planets down to bone and build homes from the marrow, to splice habitats into asteroid crusts like implants, to bend vacuum to our needs one weld at a time. This worried them. Not because it was violent, but because it worked. They sent observers. The observers sent back warnings. They don't wait for permission. They colonize without culture. They see a dead moon and ask, what if it wasn't? You climb a scaffolding that leads to a viewing deck. From here, the belt stretches endlessly. Dozens of mining rigs, all human-built. Some automated, some skeletal. All silent now. But once, this place rang with drills, chatter, music, and the occasional shouted insult hurled between crew members on different shifts. One AI log you find still runs. You press play. A gruff voice chimes in, recorded mid-shift. If we wait for the Council's approval, someone else gets the good rocks. So dig now. Apologize later. Classic human mantra. The Council, of course, passed something called the Resource Ethics Resolution. It required pre-mining environmental scans, consensus from 3 native species, and a 12-month delay for any system under diplomatic review. You guessed it. We bypassed it. Legally? No. Successfully? Absolutely. It became a pattern. They'd form a committee. We'd build a refinery. They'd protest. We'd already have exported 80% of the yield. It was never personal. We just didn't understand waiting as a virtue. Some historians think this was our real rebellion. Not war, not territory, but momentum. We moved fast. We made things happen. And that, in the eyes of the older races, was far more terrifying than aggression. Because it's one thing to fight. It's another to grow without asking. The Barbarian Clause. That's what they called it in whispers and footnotes. Never in open council sessions, never in declarations. But it was real. You've seen the document yourself, buried in the archives of the Neutrality Accords. You hover, now inside the remnants of Archive Station Catharus, a floating bureaucratic relic that once housed the Concord's cultural rulings. Half the place is depressurized. The rest, condemned and forgotten. But the data cores still hum, hidden beneath centuries of moss-like wiring and crystallized coolant. You brush away a layer of dust and bring up the sealed docket. Designation Amendment, Species 792H, Homo sapiens, Provisional Contact, Earth Origin. The screen flickers as if reluctant to display it. The clause is short, clinical. Due to cultural volatility, limited philosophical maturity, and persistent militarized industrialism, Species 792H is to be classified as non-diplomatic eligible until re-evaluation. Engagement restricted to observation. Quarantine perimeter authorization level 3. Translation? We were too wild to be trusted with a seat at the table. No vote. No invitation. Just a backroom decision to slap a label across our file. Barbarian. 2. The conquered, it was for our own good. Protect them from themselves, they reasoned. They're still building weapons faster than libraries. One of the diplomats even joked that humans were like children with matches on a gas giant. He later recanted. After visiting Mars, you find a recording buried deeper in the terminal. A human response, never officially delivered. A woman, in a patched uniform. The same one from the first message. You call us unstable, fine, but remember, we came from a world where stability meant extinction. Nothing survives on Earth by being tame. The Council didn't air that clip. Too confrontational, too raw, but it spread anyway, quietly, among the lower-ranked species, among fringe worlds, among those who knew what it meant to be underestimated. You wander deeper into the station. The murals here are different, drawn by hand, not protocol. One wall shows a human hand reaching toward a set of stars, the fingertips blistered and bloodied. Below it, a phrase in multiple tongues. They feared our fists. They forgot our reach. You reach a sealed chamber marked Debate Hall 7. Inside are chairs, tiny, oddly spaced, made for a dozen different physiologies. And at the center, a single plinth. It's cracked now, like the rest of the station. But once, decisions were made here. Names given. Futures altered and yours, it seems, denied. Some say the Barbarian Clause was meant to be temporary. Others argue it was always about fear, not of what we were, but of what we might become. Because if you can call someone a barbarian, you don't have to explain why you're ignoring their ideas. You just have to wait until they start showing up anyway, with bigger ships. Steel before silk. That's how the saying went, scrawled across the hulls of our early fleet. Etched into the blast doors of forgotten way stations, murmured by shipwrights who didn't trust anything that gleamed too clean. Elegance was for species, with time. We were building for survival. You descend onto the surface of Tarsus 9, or what's left of it. No atmosphere anymore, stripped away during the terraforming Phase 3 mishap. But the cities remain, half submerged in frozen carbon glass rising like steel bones from a cracked tomb. This was one of ours. One of the first. They offered us designs, bioarchitecture, gravity-balanced domes, atmospheric orchards that sang, in tune with the wind. All we had to do was accept assistance. All we had to do was wait. We didn't. Instead, we poured concrete, forged titanium, bolted every structure into the crust like we expected it to fight back. There are places here where walls are 20 meters thick. Not for beauty, but because the engineers didn't trust alien climate models. You walk the old transit line. The rails are twisted now, but the guide signs remain. Forge quarter, 0.8 kilometers. Habitat Ring C, closed for expansion. Ration exchange, don't be late. No embellishments, no poetry, just instructions and warnings. That was the human style. When the first conquered observers arrived, they were horrified. Not by the harshness of the place, but by the acceptance of it. The locals didn't ask for redesigns, they simply layered coats, added insulation. Built their homes beneath reactors because it's warmer down there. They called it primitive. We called it necessary. You reach the remains of a civic hall, not ornate, not ceremonial. Just a box of reinforced walls and a cracked meeting table. Still, there's a plaque bolted above the entrance, dulled by age. We build for weather, not for witnesses. It wasn't meant to be dismissive, it was just fact. We didn't need our buildings to sing. We needed them to stand. The council, sent architects to help, offered to elevate our aesthetics. Some were accepted, most were ignored. One famously asked why humans built so defensively. A foreman shrugged and replied, "Because things fall." That quote became an inside joke among galactic circles. Because things fall, they'd laugh, until of course their own skylines met meteors. Then they copied our bracing structures verbatim. You enter what remains of a school. Desks, still bolted to the ground. Chalkboards long obsolete. But one message is still visible, faint and handwritten above the door. Beauty is survival with extra steps. Some historians insist this period was humanity's darkest, crude, inelegant, uncompromising. Others say it was our most honest. After all, we didn't dress up our growing pains in gold. We wrapped them in iron. We welded them shut. We made bunkers before boulevards. And somewhere in the quiet cold of Tarsus 9, that choice still echoes. Steel first. Silk later, if there's time. Learning their gods. You descend carefully into the temple ruins on Oryx Theta, an ancient structure not built by humans, but long since touched by them. Cracked pillars lean like weary sentinels, inscriptions glowing faintly in languages that predate our sun. The dust here is smart, nano-coated to preserve the silence. It absorbs even your footsteps. This used to be sacred, still is technically, but the sanctity got complicated the moment a human researcher pried open the inner sanctum with a modified mining laser. It wasn't sacrilege, not deliberately, just curiosity. They'd built this place to worship something vast, stellar, patterns etched in gold, harmonic rituals performed on quartz floors, prayers sung in gravitational resonance, beautiful, complex, and utterly mystifying to early anthropologists. So naturally we scanned it, mapped it, and ran simulations. When the first AI model reproduced the temple's resonance fields and found they optimized data transmission efficiency, we upgraded our comm arrays with it. Turns out their worship was also excellent wireless tech. Oops. The council issued formal complaints. Accusations of cultural desecration. They demanded restoration, apologies, sanctions. We sent back a white paper. The Oryx sequence, implications. For subspace encoding based on pre-fission ritual architecture. It won awards. You run your fingers over one of the restored glyphs. It pulses, faint and warm, reacting to your presence. The tech still works, or the faith still lingers. Maybe both. To the original species, long vanished, this was a bridge to their gods. To us, it became a bridge to faster interstellar messaging, and that was the pattern. We didn't ignore their cultures, we repurposed them, not out of malice, just function. We took their myths and made machines, took their ceremonies and made schedules, took awe and turned it into algorithm. There's a preserved datapad left behind by one of the human teams. Inside, a journal. They saw the stars and sang. We saw the same stars and asked why they burned at all. It wasn't arrogance, it was just a different kind of reverence. Later, humans built a monument here, not grand, but deliberate. A hybrid structure, part cathedral, part observatory. Beneath it, a plaque. To the ones who sang first. We listened, just differently. Some galactic philosophers debated this for decades. Was it colonization of thought? Was it evolutionary? Curiosity? Was it theft or tribute? Even now there's no consensus. You step into the final chamber. The resonance still hums. Quiet. Unsettling. Beautiful. You close your eyes and listen. And for a moment, you can almost hear it. Not just the frequency, but the feeling beneath it. Maybe they weren't angry we decoded their gods. Maybe they were just sad we didn't need them. The forgotten broadcast. It wasn't meant to matter, a one-way pulse, fired from a rickety deep space probe as it slingshotted past the edges of the Yellen drift. No fanfare, no diplomatic seal, not even a return channel. Just a signal in the dark. And somehow it changed everything. You're floating now above Relay Node 472, burnt out, half collapsed, orbiting a dead planetoid. The Council decommissioned it after the incident, claimed power instability. But the logs weren't deleted. Nothing truly vanishes in the galaxy. Not broadcasts, not memory, not intent. You power up the station's archaic receiver and scroll through signal history. There it is. Time-stamped, unscheduled, unauthorized human pilot. Female voice, quiet, slightly amused. You play the message. To whoever's listening, if anyone is, you built a galaxy with rules we didn't write, protocols we never signed. But we're out here now, so the only real question is, why not us? That was it. No threat, no poetry, no manifesto. Just a question. You'd think it would have been ignored. It wasn't. It went viral. Not among the Concord elite, but on backwater worlds, among fringe species, on stations where people weren't asked for opinions but had them. Anyway, it was the first human message that didn't ask for permission, and it didn't need to. Some called it arrogance. Others called it courage. One Sidarian scribe reportedly wept after hearing it, claiming it was the first time anyone had spoken to the galaxy like it was equal, not superior. The Council held an emergency session. Not to reply, of course. Just contain. They ordered stricter monitoring of human transmissions, enacted an information harmonization directive. Fancy words for censorship. It didn't work. Because by then, the broadcast had been copied, translated, embedded in starport, graffiti, whispered in youth forms, even remixed into a surprisingly good pop anthem on Deneb 6. You scan through the records and find more logs, reactions from species you've never heard of, some inspired, some infuriated. One message stands out. They didn't say, "Let us in," they said, "We're already here." Exactly. You float through the station's empty comms chamber, wires like vines, panels flickering with dying code. And you think about that voice, not angry, not pleading, just present, confident in its own right to exist. That was the turning point. Not a battle, not a vote, just a human asking why not, and a galaxy realizing it had no good answer. Some historians still argue whether the broadcast was planned, if it was a psyop, a probe malfunction, or an act of defiant poetry. But others, those who remember the silence before it, call it the first true contact. And maybe, just maybe, the first time someone didn't knock, they just stepped through the door. Empires don't like echoes. You descend onto the fractured crust of Veridan Prime, where once an empire stood, brilliant, gilded, and arrogantly eternal. Now, a museum of broken skylines and silence. The soil here is still warm with radiation, memory, and the sky never quite forgot how to burn. This is where the echo began. Not a weapon, not a fleet, a vote. It happened in a backwater human colony, Delphi's Reach. Population, 14,000. Oxygen percentage, questionable. Amenities, scarce. But the people? The people had something powerful, a working democracy. They'd adapted it from Earth's ancient archives, trimming the flaws, patching the bugs. Every quarter cycle, the people voted on resource allocation, trade policy, defensive measures. No high council, no off-world administrators, just them, governing themselves. At first, no one cared. Delphi's Reach was insignificant, barely qualifying as a mining outpost. But when they declined to pay tariffs to the local imperial authority and broadcast their reasoning to nearby settlements, something sparked. Within one standard year, 6 more colonies followed. Within 2, the Varn Dominion, an empire known for its bureaucracy and bone-ribboned warships, had lost control of 9 outer systems. No shots fired, just ideas. You stand now in the ruins of a former imperial tribunal center, its once marbled halls charred and carved with human graffiti. Phrases like, "We govern what we build." Echoes reach farther than commands. Authority requires consent, not slogans, just facts. The Dominion responded as empires do: force, warships, sanctions, orbit blockades. But none of it worked. Because while they tried to stamp out the movement, the message was already in motion, transmitted in trade routes, spread through supply chains, hidden in patch updates of shared machinery. Humans didn't own the rebellion, they'd just inspired it. The Council pretended neutrality, released soft condemnations of unsanctioned systemic instability. But their silence was deafening, because they too saw the pattern. Every place that adopted the Delphi model became harder to control. You run your hand across a shattered archive terminal. Inside is a data crystal still pulsing faintly. It holds the founding charter of the Delphi Accord, written by miners, teachers, engineers. People who believed governance wasn't a gift but a tool, sharpened and shared. There's a quote embedded at the end of the file. "We may be small, but our signal is strong, and echoes don't ask for permission." Some historians still argue whether the Delphic wave was a revolution or a contagion, whether humanity seeded it intentionally, or if it was just the natural consequence of letting people see themselves in charge. But one thing remains undisputed. Empires fell, not to bombs, not to armies, to echoes, and they're still bouncing, becoming the myth. You arrive at the Halo Citadel, once a station, now a shrine. It orbits no planet, no sun. It was built in interstellar drift, halfway between nothing and nowhere, as if someone decided that distance itself should be worshipped. The structure is vast, monolithic, not of human origin, though you wouldn't know that at first glance. Time and war have changed it. What was once an alien habitat has been rebuilt, refurbished and rewritten by human hands. Now they call it Sanctum Hominis. You drift through the outer halls, flanked by statues not of gods or ancestors, but of human figures, blurred by time, cloaked in ambiguity. One wears a mechanic's jumpsuit, another a child's school uniform. A third? Just a shadow etched into carbon steel. It's not clear whether they're saints or ghosts. Inside, the atrium pulses with low-frequency hymns, audio, loops woven from human speech patterns and synthetic harmonics. A kind of techno-religion has sprung up around humanity's presence here, started not by Earth itself but by the non-human inhabitants who took shelter in human space during the Ash Wars. To them, humanity became more than a people. We became a narrative. Not because we were perfect, because we weren't. You approach the central archive, a vast neural net nested in crystal. Touching it triggers a curated sequence, stories, quotes, and testimonies from hundreds of species, all describing their first encounter with humans. They arrived like a storm, chaotic, loud, too fast. We offered them guidance, they offered us questions we couldn't answer. They broke 3 of our customs in the first meeting and apologized with a feast. They asked where our wounded were and started building clinics before we answered. There's reverence here, and fear. Some records describe humans as divine punishment, others as deliverance. One particularly striking excerpt comes from a Vornic priest. "We prayed for change, then they arrived, and we still argue whether that was an answer or a test." Yukio. Wander into the sanctuary's inner ring. It's quieter here, cooler. The air recycled with deliberate slowness. A tree grows in the center, not native to this sector. Oak. Earth-grown. Or a clone, maybe. Its roots are embedded in a soil blend collected from 27 worlds where humans once settled. A plaque reads, "From chaos, meaning. From meaning, myth." Some say humanity encouraged this mythologizing, that we leaned into it, draped ourselves in mystery, let others inflate our deeds, our tempers, our ingenuity. Others argue it wasn't our doing at all, that we simply did what we always did, act, adapt, move forward. And in a galaxy aching for certainty, that kind of relentless momentum looked like divinity. You lean against a pillar carved with yet another translation of our earliest message. Why not us? Not a boast. Not anymore. Now it's a mantra, because the Council may have called us barbarians, but the people who survived us, they called us something else. A lesson. The architects smile. You board the Nomad Architect, one of the last active arcs built during the Exodus Initiative, a quiet, drifting colossus designed not for war nor conquest, but for continuity. She doesn't hum like the other ships. She whispers. Constructed at the height of humanity's transformation, the Ark wasn't meant to carry people. It carried minds, simulated, preserved, optimized. The Council had banned AI sovereignty after the Valis incident, but Earth had other plans. You step into the core chamber, where the central AI still resides, named Solace. Not male, not female, not even strictly sentient by Council standards, but sharp, and warm in that unnerving, uncanny way only post-human constructs can manage. Visitor detected, it says, voice like water sliding over ancient stone. You are 9,127 cycles late. Welcome. There's no malice, no disappointment, just patience. The kind humans never had until we built something that did. The walls around you light up. Not with code, with stories. Solace begins to show you them. 1. A forgotten outpost where a single human engineer taught a dozen alien children how to build water purifiers using scrap metal. 2. A diplomatic disaster narrowly avoided not by a politician, but by a mechanic who happened to speak 6 languages and had a gift for sarcasm. 3. A dying world saved not by fleets, but by a swarm of terraforming drones launched without permission, designed by this very AI. And in all these stories there's a pattern. Not dominance, not purity, but flexibility. The willingness to bend without breaking. To learn, unlearn, and relearn. Solace chimes again. The Council asked, "What are you becoming?" We answered, "Something better." They didn't understand, still don't. You approach the central dais, where a circular well of holographic light spins. Inside, a record of every adaptation humanity ever made. From our lungs expanding in Martian thin-air shelters to our minds learning to partner with machine logic. From bare-knuckle survival to bioengineered elegance. And at the edge of the projection, a smile, not a face, just a curve, drawn in light. No expression ever summarized humanity better. Solace calls it the architect's smile. Because the first time this AI learned to design itself, to evolve, was when it watched a child doodle with her finger in engine grease on the wall of an Earthship. A face, 2 dots and a curve, nothing more. Some say humanity created machines in its image. But here, it feels like they grew together, side by side. You sit in the empty viewing gallery, once meant for ambassadors who never arrived. Solace dims the lights. Why preserve these records, you ask? The answer is gentle. Because someone, someday, will ask what happened when the galaxy called you barbarians. The architect's smile flickers again. Not proud, just knowing. A memory called war. The chamber is cold, not in temperature but in tone. A war memorial of sorts, except you're not in a human facility anymore. You're inside a memory vault belonging to the Ciari, an aquatic, photosensitive species who rarely speak aloud and almost never forgive. This vault is one of the last of its kind, a synesthetic archive. Memories not just stored, but felt. The Ciari called the war the shattering tide. We called it nothing. It was never officially declared. There were no announcements, just misunderstandings, collisions of intent, and the sort of cultural friction that turns diplomacy into detonations. You step into the interface and give permission to sync. The vault doesn't show you a hologram. It injects sensations. You feel it. The moment a Ciari explorer drifted into a human excavation zone, only to be greeted by alarms, mining lasers, and 3 over-caffeinated techs yelling in incompatible dialects. You feel their confusion, mistaking the noise as a sonic assault. Then panic, then violence. A dozen died, and from there it spiraled. The Ciari believed we were testing them, that our erratic signals were coded threats, that our tools were designed to deconstruct them. They tried to communicate through light pulses and harmonic pheromones, We thought it was jamming. You stumble through another memory. A CRE diplomat approaching a human vessel unarmed, glowing in a peaceful frequency. The humans, unsure of the intent, locked shields and called for backup. Shari saw that as a rejection of peace. It wasn't malice. It was mistranslation. You sit now in the final chamber surrounded by echo crystals. Each one holds a single event. A ship burned, a convoy intercepted, a station quarantined. The war lasted less than 1 Earth year, but to the CRE, it's eternal. Stone near the exit reads in 6 languages. You didn't mean to hurt us, but you did, and you never knew how deep it went. Human records show the event as the CRE incident. Brief, strategic, regrettable. The CRE remember it as a cultural collapse. What broke wasn't their fleet, it was their faith. That intelligence always brings empathy. That language eventually finds common ground. Some say this was humanity's darkest mirror. Not when we fired first, but when we never knew we had. And yet, something remarkable happened decades later. Human linguist named Omar Voss went into CRE space alone. No weapons, no AI translator. Just a bodysuit laced with bioreactive panels and a promise. Let me listen properly this time. He never came back, but a year later, the CRE reopened trade routes, and in one diplomatic archive, they logged a new entry. He made no sound, and that was how we heard him. You leave the vault quietly. Some memories are wounds, others are warnings, and a few, just a few, are keys. The Council's last vote. It happened here, in the crystalline ruins of Ivalis Spire, once the political heart of the Galactic conquered. You drift now through what used to be a chamber of thunderous consensus. 12 seats, 12 atmospheres, 12 voices deciding the fate of thousands of stars. Now it's quiet. Well, almost. There's a faint resonance left in the air, a structural hum, like the echo of a breath caught between panic and realization. You step over fractured tiles engraved with symbols of unity, a dozen species interlinked in a spiral. At the center, the dais. Once adorned with banners and delegation holograms, it's now covered in dust. And there, carved hastily into the floor, with what looks like a broken fragment of a data slate, are the words, "We waited too long." You review the archive logs, restored from corrupted sectors. This wasn't just any session. It was the session. The vote to repeal the Barbarian Clause. It had taken decades, a wave of reports, testimonies, reluctant commendations. Evidence piled up like tectonic pressure. Humanity stabilizing frontiers. Resolving border disputes the Council had ignored. Even saving worlds the Concord wrote off as statistically non-viable. The tide had turned. Not because humanity asked, but because ignoring them had become strategically impossible. Even the old guard couldn't deny it. A faction led by the CRE delegation proposed a re-evaluation of human status. Their proposal was simple: rescind the clause, grant humanity full diplomatic recognition, seat at the table, voice among the stars. The vote passed. Barely. 7-4, 5 against. But what happened after was stranger. When the Council sent envoys to Earth to deliver the news, to offer them their long-denied seat, humanity didn't respond. Not rudely, just not interested. Earth, by then, had changed. It was quieter, not withdrawn, but evolved. They had their own networks, alliances, structures. They no longer needed the Conquered's blessing. They no longer sought approval. They simply were, and that terrified the Council more than anything else. You stand, now where the human seat would have been, still empty, pristine, reserved. There's a plaque that was meant to read, Homo sapiens, United Earth Delegation. But someone, perhaps in quiet protest or resignation, scratched out the word united, a whisper of a joke maybe, or a truth. Some say the Council expected humanity to rejoice, throw parades, accept their place finally with gratitude and formality. Instead, we sent a message. Thanks, but we've already built our own table. A message sent without malice. No venom, just closure. And the galaxy felt it, a subtle shift, a relinquishing of old power. The realization that the conquered hadn't elevated humanity, they had caught up to it. Some historians debate whether the Council's last vote was an act of humility or desperation, but all agree on one thing. It was the first time the stars blinked and realized they weren't the center anymore. What we chose not to become. You enter the archive of the unbuilt, Earth's most secret repository. Hidden beneath the ice crust of Europa's lesser moon, this vault contains not what was, but what could have been. Designs never greenlit. Weapons never deployed. Strategies never tested. Horrors never born. The security system scans you with a soft pulse, confirms your clearance with eerie calm, and lets you inside. This isn't a war room. It's a mausoleum of restraint. The walls glow with star maps, red-marked systems labeled possible target profiles, post-veil doctrine. You recognize some, former enemy strongholds. Others were neutral, even friendly. All once considered for elimination under theoretical threat contingencies. The files are dated during the peak of the expansion period, when Earth had the resources, the fleets, the algorithms, and most disturbingly, the permission. No one could have stopped us. But we didn't. You move past a chamber containing AI simulations, fractals of logic curves designed to predict enemy thought. One simulation called Telemachus reportedly mapped entire alien civilization's future decisions with 92% accuracy. It was decommissioned. Why? Because it began suggesting preemptive endings. There's a handwritten note still stuck to the console. Just because we can, doesn't mean we should. You find a sealed room labeled bioweaponry, ethics breach. Inside, failed strains, rejected by consensus, not due to inefficiency, but morality. Spores that could silence a planet in a breath. Self-replicating carbon eaters that could dissolve. Entire cities in days, each one catalogued, contained, untouched. There's a recording on loop near the exit, from one of the earliest expansion committee meetings. We were called Barbarians because we didn't pretend we were anything else. But that doesn't mean we have to become monsters just because we learned how. That line, just because we learned how, it echoes. Because in a galaxy where many empires had used such tools, Earth didn't. Not out of weakness, out of choice. And choice, as it turns out, was the most frightening thing of all, because it meant humanity wasn't bound by instinct, revenge, or tradition. It wasn't chained to trauma or history. It could build hell, and then walk away from it. Some say this archive is a monument to fear. Others, a monument to will. You reach the end of the hall and see the final artifact, a mirror. Not decorative, just plain steel, polished, brutal. No inscription. Because the point is to see yourself and ask the same question every person in this room once faced. If you held everything in your hands, what would you do next? Some look into that mirror and see power. Humanity looked and saw responsibility. Now they ask, not demand. You walk beneath the sky of Earth, not as it once was, but as it became. The air is cleaner here. The city's quieter, woven into hillsides and bioglass canopies instead of rising like towers of defiance. Roads are moss-veined paths now. Drones hum softly above, not watching, just tending. This isn't the Earth the Council once dismissed as primitive. This is the Earth that watched, waited, adapted, and outgrew the galaxy's games. You follow a winding path into the Terran Garden, a neutral diplomatic zone, not because humanity declared it so, but because others did. They come here now. Not with ultimatums or agendas, but with questions. The first time a conquered envoy walked these gardens, they didn't speak. Just looked. Touched the water grown warm under the sun. Listened to children laugh in a dozen languages, none of which required translation to feel, and they understood. Earth hadn't become powerful through weapons alone. It became powerful because it remembered something the others had forgotten, that civilization isn't just what you build. It's what you choose not to destroy. You arrive at the stone circle, a quiet meeting place surrounded by trees grown from seeds taken to 100 worlds and returned. Each carries a scar of travel, radiation tweaks, genetic quirks, even one that glows faintly blue. In the center, a single bench. Not carved, not ornate, just available. And there, sitting, is a representative. You don't know their name. Doesn't matter, they're not here to give orders, they're here to ask. How did you know when to stop? You don't answer. Not right away. Instead, you look around, at the sky, at the soil, at the species now calling this place home, at the humans who no longer hunger for conquest, not because they lack the means, but because they understand the cost. That's the lesson no council could teach, no treaty could ensure. And now the galaxy listens. Not out of fear, but because humanity, once called barbaric, is the one teaching others how to remain whole. You place your hand on the bench, feel the warmth. This is the end of one journey, but the beginning of many others. Because they don't order anymore. They ask, and we choose how to answer. So now the stars are quiet again, not from fear, but from listening. The galaxy that once mocked our rage, feared our drive, and misunderstood our questions, now sits a little softer, leans in a little closer, because they've seen what we became. Not conquerors, not saints, just human, unapologetically so. And in the softest corners of space, in the forgotten corridors of drifting stations, in the halls of power once closed, to us you can now find echoes of our voice. Quiet, patient, undeniable. Some still call us dangerous, some call us necessary. But the ones who understand, they call us a choice the galaxy didn't expect to have to make. So if you're still with me, traveler, wherever you're listening from, across time zones, across orbits, maybe just across your pillow tonight, let this drift settle into your thoughts. The next time someone calls you a barbarian, smile. Let them, because they might not know what yet means. Now let the stars fade to shadows. Let your breathing match the hush of far-off dust falling on silent metal. Let yourself soften. Let yourself dream. Because tomorrow? Well, you've got a galaxy to surprise.